Okay.
Welcome to Tony at 12. I'm Tony Le Blanc, and today I'm in conversation with my daughter Mitch and my son-in-law Colin. We're going to be looking at their love of the cinema and the books that they have written and co-authored, and also a look at their new project. So good to see you both.
Lovely to see you too. Yeah, it's been a while.
It has indeed, yes. Yeah, I mean, you know, we're sort of hoping to see you this year. I'm sure
that would be amazing.
Let's kick off then about the films and the fascination of the cinema. You met at the University of Warwick, and
That's
so
right.
what was the first you know, how did you get onto the subject of cinemas and movies and things?
Well, we went to the filmmaking society, didn't we? So it was Freshers Week. We went to filmmaking society, and someone introduced us as liking weird films. So, you know, someone said, "Oh, this is Colin. He likes weird films," and "Oh, this is Mitch. He likes weird films." So our very first words to each other were,
"Have you seen 72 Noughts?
Oh no, have you seen Wings of Desire?" and from then we became best friends, and we're going to the cinema. The Warwick University has a fantastic art centre, and we saw all sorts of art films and world cinema, and it was just brilliant. So yeah, spent a lot of time just in the cinema, as well as studying, obviously.
Yeah, well, one would hope so. But it's fascinating, isn't it, really, how you could sort of just meet like that and, you know, have this joint interest in movies. I mean, where did you start off with Colin on it, in terms of fascination with films?
Ever since I was a child, really, and watched films like Jason and the Argonauts, of course. But when I saw A Matter of Life and Death with David Niven, the Baron Pressburger one, I liked it so much, but I didn't know the title, so I read the whole of Halliwell's film guide in the library until I found the one with the correct person and plot.
Happy days when you rely on books rather than the internet, which would have found it probably for you in seconds.
Yes,
exactly.
What about you, Mitch? Because you know, we sort of used to watch movies on the television when you were at home before you went off to uni, but don't recall, you know.
Yeah, I think I was always interested in the cinema. I remember, you know, sort of when I was old enough to go up to London, I could go up and see some films at various art house cinemas there. So we didn't really have a cinema when we were, you know, Woking didn't have a cinema.
No.
So it was trying to find opportunities to go and see films, and, you know, started reading film magazines and discovering a whole world of cinema out there. I think the thing for us that we discovered was fantastic was the world cinema. You know, sort of, you know, Hollywood films tend to be a bit samey once you've seen them all. They have a very similar narrative structure, whereas happy endings. Whereas actually seeing films from other cultures and other countries, you get a very different perspective on the world of cinema, and it's fascinating and interesting and sometimes challenging, but it's always exciting. I mean, even if the films are bad, they're often interesting to watch.
At least they're different and bad. Rather than...
Yeah, but that's right.
We like everything. I mean, we watch everything from high art to trash, and anything from 1896 onwards. You know, we love the oldies. We love, you know, world cinema. It's just exploring new and interesting places and stories, and yeah, it's just fascinating.
To not know what you're going to get.
Yeah.
Would you agree then that Hollywood is a bit like pop music on occasions? I mean, I put it to you, the Pirates of the Caribbean, for example, they milked that one until the poor old animal fell down dead.
The thing is, the first film was actually good fun. I don't think they expected it to be as successful as it was.
Because of Delancey's Pirates that tanked in the box office, and Cutthroat Island, another pirate film, tanked in the box office. So they assumed that another pirate film was going to be a very bad idea.
But, you know, they based it on a you know, a theme ride at Disney World. So it was a really odd film. But actually, as an adventure story, it was jolly good fun. The problem was that they ended it in a nice, satisfactory conclusion. You know, sort of everyone had their adventure and got back together. And the problem was that it was so successful, they decided to do a sequel. And when doing that sequel, they had to sort of split everybody up, have an adventure and sort of get them back together. And then, oh, well, let's film 2 films while we're at it. And
let's have a really bad.
Yeah.
Another one last year, a spin-off as well.
And it just lost its initial impact.
How many movies do you currently have in your collection?
Oh gosh. Well, we started off with VHS, obviously, and we used to build up a little bit of a collection there. And then we moved on to DVD and Blu-ray. The VHS collection ended up under the bed. There was one stage we had 500 VHS films under the bed. I decided to have a bit of a clear out, moved the videos, and the bed collapsed. So
It was literally holding it up.
They'd be propping it up.
So you know, films that kept us safe.
Yeah. So I think we've probably got a few thousand DVDs and Blu-rays.
Yeah, yeah.
And VCDs, yes, for a lot of Asian cinema used to come on VCD. So yeah, there's a few thousand there, and again,
they're
all indexed, are they? You know where they are.
Well, I don't. He does.
some of them are alphabetical. Some of them are by director, and a couple of them are by studios.
Yeah, Colin's got a filing system, and it works for him.
I mean, if you want to watch a Disney film, you use the Disney folder. You see, that makes perfect sense.
It's generally catalogued.
So your enthusiasm eventually gets you published. Books, impressive. How did that come about?
Well, it was about 21, 22 years ago. A friend of ours who's called Paul Duncan, a lovely guy, he had initiated a series of books called Pocket Essentials. And he had the idea to create essential guides to various film directors and film genre. And he was writing one about Hitchcock. And he needed a few obscure Hitchcock films. And we were introduced to him.
As being people who were likely to have silent Hitchcock films that weren't involving murder.
So we met him and lent him some of our films. And he asked whether we did any writing, because he could tell, we got chatting with him, and he was he's a great cinephile, and he could tell that we were. And he asked if we'd done any writing, and in fact we'd written some articles for the British Science Fiction Association magazine, so film reviews, and we used to do a review of the science fiction films of each year. So yeah, we'd done a bit of writing, and he invited us to write a chapter on David Lynch. Right. So we spent a pretty frantic weekend writing a sample chapter, and we sent it to him, and he liked it, and he offered us the job of writing a small guide to David Lynch. And then that blossomed into further Pocket Essentials on Jackie Chan, horror films,
vampire films.
And it really went from there. So, it sort of really, we were able to use our love of various directors and genres to write about them.
Were they difficult to, in terms of research or anything like that? Or how did you sort of come up with all the information?
So there was generally a standard structure to the books because they were essential guides. Basically you'd have a synopsis, and then you would discuss the film. We had little bits of trivia about the making of the film, and they liked having a rating as well. A lot of it was just actually finding the time to watch the films, and you do. Sorry.
Yes, no, you watch them.
Yeah, you watch them, and then you watch them again and again. It does depend. So the vampire films book, we watched about 100 films in 3 months. And it does. So we covered about 100 films.
Yeah, and it was something really but
yeah, it was good fun, but it was quite intense.
Everyone has their own cross to bear.
Having a bit of a problem hearing Colin. I'm having a bit of a problem hearing Colin. Can you pull the computer around a bit, or?
Yeah. How's that?
Test it, Colin.
No.
Oh,
no.
Sorry.
Sorry. So how many? You did about half a dozen pocket essentials, was it? Or
six pocket essentials, and we
Yeah.
contributed to other ones as well. We also wrote a couple of cover mounts for some magazines on science fiction films and cult TV, wasn't there? There was so there was a
horror and fantasy.
Horror and fantasy.
Yeah. And then of course you then went on to camera books, which would it be unkind to say they're a bit more upmarket than pocket essentials, or
it's actually the same publisher.
Unfair? Yeah.
It's the same publisher, but we had a bigger word count.
Right.
So the pocket essentials, they were generally, you know, small guides that were cheap books where you could have a, you know, sort of a basic guide to a film director or a genre. Whereas the camera books, they did have higher production values, and we could get pictures in them. That's right. So the idea with pocket essentials is very much cheap guides, whereas the camera books, it was a more in-depth look.
And it was at camera that you came up with Ghibli, the Japanese cartoons.
Yes, we love Ghibli. We first saw Laputa, the Flying Island, in 1992, was it? Our friend ran a science fiction course, sort of film course, and actually it was a really good opportunity just to sort of go along to his class and watch a good film and talk about it. But it was there that we first saw Laputa. And a few years later, we managed to find My Neighbor Totoro, which is the most delightful fantasy. It's charming. It makes me cry with sheer joy. It's just charming and uplifting.
Charming, uplifting, and suitable for all the family. It's rated U, so So it's.
We initially pitched it to the public. The book for Ghibli, we initially pitched it to the publisher for 2001, but at the time, Spirited Away had just won an Oscar for Best Foreign Language Film, but I don't think the popularity was quite there. He certainly didn't feel it was commercial enough at the time. So we put it in our back pocket and pitched it again a few years later. And they said yes. And it's our bestseller.
It's our bestseller.
That's incredible. Because the artwork is beautiful, isn't it? It's not
just
crude or anything like that. It's really, really lovely to look at.
Yeah, both Miyazaki and Takahata, who were the studio's founders, they were real artisans, and they really took their craft seriously. And a lot of the frame, I mean, it was cell animation as well. So they, you know, I think hundreds of thousands of animation cells that they looked over and they supervised, and they were really hands-on.
It's handcrafted film. That's, you know, it's a wonderful thing because it's actual art.
Yeah,
that's right.
The films themselves are so uplifting and inspiring and creative, and they used, I mean, Miyazaki's imagination just goes in so many different directions. You just sort of go with the flow, don't you? But they're just absolutely beautiful films.
Even when they're sad. Fireflies.
Yeah.
Were they all done in the old arrangement, you know, 32 frames to the second? They weren't computerized, were they?
No, handcrafted. So it's 24 frames per second.
24, yeah, okay.
And the level of detail that they put into them. I mean, when you look at wind blowing through the grass in some of Miyazaki's films, it's absolutely astonishing. Or the rain falling. You know, the quality of the animation is absolutely superb. They are true artists. The other thing about Ghibli films that's interesting is they're not only fantasy films. A lot of the films by Takahata or their protege Yoshifumi Kondo, they needn't have been filmed as animation. They're stories that could actually just as easily have been filmed as live action, but they're animated and they are absolutely gorgeous stories that just draw you in, you know, very human stories.
That's very good.
Yesterday, which is, you know, covers generations, so it would be easier now perhaps to do with CG to have people looking older and younger and things, but in animation it's so much more delicate.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing. You don't need sets for animation. You don't need to recreate history, historical sets or artifacts. You've got the animation medium is such that you can go wherever the artist takes you.
Even if it's another place.
Yeah.
Yeah. These days, though, presumably it's all computer assisted, is it?
A lot of animation is. I think Ghibli certainly held out for a long time. The two founders, Miyazaki Hayao, who's the most famous of the two, he has a particular style, and you can tell a Miyazaki film just by looking at it. His friend Isao Takahata, who formed the studio with him, he was always prone to experimenting, so he would try different styles and techniques.
Okay, let's move on to the British Film Institute, because you did a book for them, didn't you?
We did. That was in 2014. The BFI ran a season of science fiction films called Days of Fear and Wonder. And to accompany the films, they all commissioned a series of BFI classics. And because we'd written about Ghibli and anime, we had a bit of knowledge about anime, which is Japanese animation. And we were invited to write a book about Akira. It's Katsuhiro Otomo's anime from 1988, which we saw together. It was actually the 26th of April 1991.
Still have the ticket.
Which is very sad. But that was the very first anime we saw, and it was an ICA presentation. There was one print in the entire country, and it did the rounds of all the art cinemas around the country. So by the time it got to Warwick Arts Centre, it was a little bit shabby, but we were absolutely blown away by it, weren't we?
Now, because of your writing prowess, you got invited to quite a few festivals, didn't you? And I just want to talk very briefly about meeting the mayor of Aberystwyth.
That was lovely. It was a friend who we met at a film journalism event. They had never shown The Life of Brian at Aberystwyth because it had been banned when it first came out. Yeah. And as it happened, the mayor of Aberystwyth played Brian's girlfriend in the film. So they invited Michael Palin and Terry Jones and Sue Jones to the world premiere. Well, sorry, the Aberystwyth premiere. The Welsh premiere.
Yeah. Welsh premiere.
Yeah, of Life of Brian, and it was absolutely delightful. We got to meet Terry Jones and Michael Palin, and they were and Sue Jones as well, and they were absolutely delightful.
Tell me how the mayor introduced herself.
Oh, she introduced herself as the Welsh tart.
in the Life of Brian.
She signed our DVD, The Welsh Tart, which was
really.
She was absolutely delightful.
Now, sorry.
DVD as well.
Yeah.
Apart from festivals and things like that, you also did a bit of radio work for Coventry, BBC Coventry, and you were on Woman's Hour.
Well,
I wasn't.
Michelle was.
Yeah, so we've been doing a lot of film reviews on the local radio station, and Women's Hour actually got in touch with our publisher because they were they wanted to talk about the film Orphan came out a few years ago, and it was sort of a horror story about sort of a killer child, and they wanted to talk about devilish children in the cinema, and because we'd written books on horror, as the female half of the team, I was invited to Women's Hour. The interview's still up there, actually. It's on their website, but it was very interesting going to a broadcasting house and chatting with Jane Garvey about sort of demonic children in the cinema, scary kids. We spent a weekend looking at lots of scary children film, didn't we? So we watched It's Alive and obviously Orphan.
Omen.
The Omen, of course.
Children of the Damned.
Yes.
Both versions.
Well, there you go. Now, your recent work has been with Taschen, hasn't it?
It has, yes.
And I did a little bit of Wikipedia on them. They've been going 40 years now, apparently.
Yeah.
And Mr. Taschen is still very active in it. And, this is my interpretation, not yours. I have to say, I think they probably fit into the Rolls-Royce of publishers in terms of the way in which everything's presented. It really is good. It's expensive, it's there for collectors, but it's obviously very, very successful. So with that in mind, you've co-authored one on James Bond, one on Chaplin, and the recent one on Star Wars.
We did.
So,
And it was a great honour to be invited.
Yeah.
So again, that was our friend Paul, who we kept in touch with. He'd moved on from Pocket Essentials to start working with Taschen.
yeah.
And these are beautiful, beautiful books. We've always said that you know, they're coffee table books in that you could stick 4 legs on them and turn them into a coffee table. Sort of couple of feet wide.
They should be provided with fittings.
They really do. They come with a carry case.
Yeah.
You have handles. You have handles on the cardboard box.
Tell me. So, you know, if you, I think you did two of the movies in the Bond franchise, didn't you?
Just the one. We did Moonraker in the Bond franchise.
Yeah.
Three for
so it all turned up in tea chests, did it? All of the information.
We had, yeah. The thing about
and it had to be driven in an Aston Martin, the Bond one.
Oh, it would have been nice, didn't it? So what happens is basically these books tell the oral history of the making of the film, and they have beautiful illustrations of the you know, sort of scenes from the film, as well as production notes and production material as well.
So like the sets and the script.
Yeah.
And some of the concept drawings and things like that. So the job on these is to piece together the story of the making of the film, and it's a fascinating process. You have to be very, very disciplined when you're doing it, because there's so much material, and you sort of see something, oh, that's really interesting, and want to explore it in a different direction. So you have to sort of pull yourself back. But we were given access to lots of production material, things like daily production reports, interviews with various people who were involved at the time, and you put it all together and build the timeline of the making of the film.
And sorry, Colin.
I was going to say, in the case something like Circus, you know, the Charlie Chaplin film, he spent about a couple of years making that, and so we had to go through every day's notes of pages and pages and pages of notes every day.
So we actually created a spreadsheet of daily production reports, so we could see what he was doing at what particular time. And you know, he was so meticulous when making his films. He would reshoot and reshoot and reshoot to get that absolutely perfect shot, because you know, he was in a position where he, you know, the most successful person in cinema at the time, and he was an absolute perfectionist. And it was fascinating to go through all the material and to you know, to understand which shot he would take and retake and retake and retake until he got it perfect.
It's quite incredible the material was still available, isn't it?
It is. We were very lucky. We had access to the Charlie Chaplin archive, which is extensive. And another thing that was really interesting was there were articles in magazines. You know, so maybe it was an article on Chaplin within a magazine, but you'd see other interesting cinematic articles in that magazine and really, really want to explore them. But we knew we had to, you know, sort of focus on the Chaplin. It's a fascinating process.
You were subject to a deadline, of course.
Yes.
Was it difficult to find the hours?
As long as you focus, actually, I'm fairly. We've never missed a deadline, no. So we've always kept to all our deadlines. So yeah.
Okay. So the latest one is the second Star Wars, which you've co-authored, and tell us what sort of period does that cover in terms of the movies?
So we grew up with the first movie. The first trilogy in the 1970s. I remember you taking us to the Empire, Leicester Square in 1978 to see the original Star Wars, which was fantastic. So those ones have been covered in the first book. So the Star Wars: A New Hope, The Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi had been covered in the first set of the Star Wars archive. So we focused on the second trilogy,
which is set chronologically before the first food.
So this was.
So you did 1, 2, and 3.
We did
Yes,
1, 2, and 3. Phantom Menace,
yeah.
Attack of the Clones, and Revenge of the Sith.
Right. Okay.
That was absolutely fascinating because we got access to a lot of the production artwork. One of the things that was really interesting was that George Lucas commissioned a whole bunch of concept artists to design planets and systems and characters and vehicles and starships. So we got access to all the concept art, and it was stunningly beautiful. I mean, what we were very lucky because not all of the art could make it into the book, but we managed to see a lot of the original drawings from the most talented artists.
It's interesting, isn't it, when you effectively start a series of films in the middle?
Yeah.
Was it his intention right from the start?
He says it was, yeah.
Yeah.
I think you know, sort of some people say it possibly wasn't, and that it never had a new hope. But I think he'd always planned it to be the story. It's basically the story of Darth Vader, really. And I think I guess in some respects he wasn't expecting the first film to be as successful as it was, and I mean it was absolutely massive. And the anticipation for the trilogy that we worked on was it was monumental, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
But I remember at the time when the original film, well, actually when Empire Strikes Back came out, the second one, so episode 5.
Fifth episode.
When that came out, he was talking then about it being 9 films, even then. So
All right.
it was. He had planned it like that.
Yeah.
Maybe he hadn't planned the plots the way he eventually did them, but you know, it's fascinating. And the difference between the beautiful old school filmmaking that he made in the 70s and the fact that the episodes 1, 2, and 3 saw the start of real digital filmmaking because he used digital cameras on that. That is actually the start of the new millennia, start of the new way, the digital way of filming. I mean, there were digital cameras before, but I mean, that was the first real major film was Sith, wasn't it? Yeah. Really, it was all filmed digitally.
And also, I think people should recognise what an innovator he was. You know, it was absolutely astonishing learning all the techniques that he was using to edit, and he spent a long time. You know, the shoot times of the films are relatively short, and he spent a long time editing and then going back to reshoot. But it shouldn't be underestimated the importance of Lucas in developing digital cinema.
Yeah.
And distributing it as well. So now, you know, you don't, you know, a lot of cinema, you know, there are very few celluloid cinemas anymore. Yeah. You know, it's digital now. I mean,
even on Alderney. Right. Any more books in the pipeline?
Not at the moment. We've got some ideas for some, so we're thinking of possibly having a pitch in the future, but not at the moment.
Okay, but you must tell us a little bit about your latest project.
Yeah, so actually that's what we've been working on. So as well as films, we absolutely love travel and also food. So we've started a blog, and it's called Very Tasty World. And it's a blog about the places we've been to, as well as the food that we've eaten. And the idea is that we can share recipes from all over the world. But I think the other thing is we do have a film connection in there, because there are so many world films that that you know involve food. So you know, things like What's Cooking, The Lunchbox, Tampopo. There are a whole bunch of films as well. So even though it's predominantly a blog about travel and food, we've still managed to get the odd film review in there.
You know, My Life as a Courgette.
So it's available on the internet. It doesn't cost you anything to have a look at it, and it's called Very Tasty World. Yeah.
That's lovely. Yeah, we'd be delighted if you wanted to have a look.
Yeah, absolutely. No commitment, nothing.
Absolutely.
But some good ideas about food.
Yeah, we hope that you know, people will get inspired by places to travel and the food that you can eat there.
Yeah, well, there we are. Well, look, thank you so much for all your time. Really enjoyed talking to you as ever. And
Thank you ever so much.
hopefully see you later on in the year.
That would be great, wouldn't it?
You know, real life.
Yes. I can give you a hug.
Oh dear.
No, don't go too.
Take care.
And
Take
lovely
care.
to see you.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.